what we're here to do today is to introduce you to gerrymandering. So without further ado, Mr. Husick.
Thank you very much. I hope this evening to spend the next few minutes with you talking about this very long-standing problem here in our nation and in our Commonwealth, to help you understand how it came about, why it is so insidious, and what we as concerned citizens and voters may be able to do about it. And that is really the extent of what I hope to do here tonight, because as a representative of Fair Districts PA, which is a joint project of the League of Women Voters and Common Cause of Pennsylvania, our concern is to present this issue and then help to guide our fellow citizens in solving this problem in a completely nonpartisan fashion. So whether you are affiliated with a party or not, whether you vote regularly or not, this is something that affects you, and I hope that you will come away from this evening with a better understanding and feeling energized that we, the people, can actually make a difference. So with that, let's jump in. Here are a couple of hypothetical voters that help us to begin to explain the problem. This is my hypothetical voter, Don. And he's a Democrat, and he lives in Philadelphia. And because he lives in Philadelphia and he knows that a Democrat will always win the general election in Philadelphia, he doesn't bother to vote in the general election. It's a foregone conclusion. Now, similarly, here is my next hypothetical voter. My hypothetical voter here is also a Democrat, but she is unfortunate enough to live where she may be the only Democrat in her county. And she knows similarly that a Democrat has never won the general election in her county and never will, and so she doesn't bother to vote. Now, these are problems. Here's our last, well, potentially hypothetical voter, Lawrence. Lawrence is a former Republican. I was a Republican from the time I could register to vote until last summer. And I was a Republican who was pretty committed to the party back when Ronald Reagan was exemplary of the party. But I also knew that in Chester County for a long time, if you wanted to have input into who won in the general election, you had to vote in the Republican primary. And if you wanted your Republican lawmaker to talk with you, and he was going to be a Republican lawmaker, you had better be a Republican as well. And that persisted for quite a long time. Now, why do I bring these voters up? Because these voters are emblematic of a problem that we have more generally. And that is that people feel disengaged from the process, and for many reasons they are unlikely to vote. And one of the biggest problems is this problem of politicians picking their voters rather than the other way around. Now, I am old enough that I first learned civics not in a high school classroom, but by watching television in the afternoon after school. And so I figure if it was good enough for me, it's good enough for you. Here we go, some Schoolhouse Rock.
Representative democracy in USA, we elect legislators, that's how laws are made. 435 reps in Congress means 435 districts among us. But how do we decide who represents who? We draw lines on a map, that's what we do. District population should be roughly the same, so every vote counts in the very same way. Keep communities together so every voice is heard. Since populations move, shift, shrink, and expand, we get some data every census, then we draw them again. So politicians are accountable to every last woman and man.
Okay, y'all got that? We can go home now, right? The problem is the politicians have the game rigged. How do they have it rigged? Because we have a right to expect that it's one person, one vote, but the problem is it's not. It's not because we have two factors that make that untrue, and that's gerrymandering and the Electoral College. We'll get to the Electoral College on another date sometime. And it doesn't especially matter what party you belong to, or even if you're not affiliated with a party, because depending on where you live and who's voting, your vote is worth less than someone else's vote. Less. Why is this? It's because the people who are in power want it exactly that way, and they're comfortable having it stay that way. So we have a right to ask, what about we the people? What are we, chopped liver? Why don't we matter? Now, this problem of politicians picking their voters has been around a very long time, and no less a personage than St. Ronald of Reagan recognized this problem long ago. And after he was out of office in 1991, he in fact said that this was a stain on our democracy, that this drawing of lines was something that belied a much deeper problem. So how far back does it go? Well, here's your civics history lesson for tonight. The problem of gerrymandering is named after an early 1800s governor of Massachusetts named Elbridge Gerry. So yes, it is gerrymandering. We just don't think that's fun to say. He drew a map that would keep his political party in power. The Boston newspaper said, gee, that looks like a salamander. They jammed together his name and salamander and came up with gerrymander. And this problem has been going on since the early 1800s. Why do politicians do this? Well, they do it to choose their voters. They do it to eliminate incumbents and challengers in very insidious ways. They do it to dilute minority votes, to bleach a district. And they do it to split up communities of interest, to dilute people who might vote against them. Now, why do we allow this to happen? Well, we allow it to happen because under our Constitution, there are 435 seats in the House. We are required under the Constitution to do a census every 10 years and then reapportion based on that census. And when we reapportion and the number of representatives per state changes, then we have to change the districts in order to achieve roughly equal numbers in each district, and that involves drawing the lines on a map. In Pennsylvania, we do this for the Congress by passing a normal bill through the legislature. So it's got to be proposed in the House and Senate. It's got to be passed there. It's then got to go to the governor for signature. And if the governor doesn't want to sign it and vetoes it, then it can be overridden, and we get those maps drawn that way. For the state House and Senate, the process is different. And under the Pennsylvania Constitution, we have a commission that is the majority and minority leaders of both the Senate and the House sitting on this commission. So if you are not a Republican or a Democrat, sorry, you're not represented on that commission. And those four leaders of the political parties, have 45 days to choose a chairman agreeable to them. And if they can't agree, and I don't see any reason why they should, and in the past they haven't, then a majority vote of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court appoints the chairman of that commission, and that commission draws the lines for the Pennsylvania House and Senate. So we have two different ways of doing it. The maps, according to our Constitution, are supposed to be drawn so that the districts are compact, so that they are contiguous, they all touch together, and so that they're roughly equal in population. And then the Constitution adds a few more qualifications, the most important one being we're not supposed to unnecessarily split up existing political subdivisions. So to the greatest extent possible, everyone who lives in your town, borough, township, or city is supposed to be in the same district if we can. How's that working? Well, here is the famous 7th in Pennsylvania, and I would submit to you that this doesn't look very compact or contiguous. It, in fact, looks very strange. Some people have said that it looks like Goofy kicking Donald. I actually prefer to call it the Jerry Moose. You'll never be able to unsee that one, by the way. In fact, there is one place in the Jerry Moose, right there. That's a parking lot that's about 100 yards wide behind the King of Prussia Mall. It's the only thing that joins the two major segments of the district together, is that parking lot. It's right along the turnpike. You can visit it. It's quite scenic. And wrapping around the 7th is the historically weird 6th, which is also strange. Now, if you think that this has been a problem forever, well, it has, but not so much of a problem until more recently. Here is a depiction of how the 7th has evolved over the course of successive census takings. Back in the 1950s, it looked reasonably compact, reasonably contiguous. But with the advent of better and better computer software, that has allowed the drawing of the district to get out of hand until we have the Jerry Moose. Now, this is not just a Pennsylvania problem. This is a map that shows where there are gerrymanders that are political as opposed to racial in the United States. And as you can see, almost all of the bias in these states happens to be a Republican bias, because starting before the last census, before 2010, the Republican Party put together a program to make sure that it would control map drawing in a great many states. They paid close attention, they put resources into the problem, and it paid benefits. Exactly what benefits, might you ask? Well, here's one. Despite winning less than 50% of the vote in congressional races in 2012, the Republicans ended up controlling our delegation in Washington 13-5. A huge, outlandish majority. Now, what went on? Well, the top map shows you what went on. The districts were drawn as you've seen, and that disadvantaged Democrats who are concentrated in the major cities of the state. It left vast swaths of the state open for Republican control. Now, lest you think that this is somehow fair, the bottom map depicts what happened when I simply took the map drawing software and ran it the other way with exactly the same vote totals from 2012. And the result was, in this hypothetical application of the map, 13 Democrats and 5 Republicans. And when you can change political representation by tweaking a couple of numbers in a computer program so radically, that means something is wrong in our democracy. That means that the voting is not being representative. So let's step back a moment and make sure everybody understands how this works. If you had a state like Delaware, which has only one representative in the House, in Congress, you'd have no gerrymandering. It would be impossible. But as soon as you have to draw a line to create 2 or more districts, mischief can sneak in. So here's our hypothetical state, and our hypothetical state is 60-40 green versus purple party. If it had only one representative in Congress, we can all agree, I think, that that representative would be a green representative. Now, we could draw some straightforward districts, and if we took our wonderfully square state and we drew the districts vertically, I think you would see that in these 5 districts, 3 of them would be green dominated and 2 of them would be purple dominated. And that would make pretty good sense. If we instead drew it the other way, however, horizontally, every single one of the districts would end up being 3-2 green, and all of the representatives from our square state would be green representatives. That would be unfair. Unfair to the 40% of the voters who are purple voters. And lest you think that there is not yet more opportunity for shenanigans, if we carefully draw the lines a different way, we can end up with a majority of purple representatives from this same state, which should remind you of the 2012 Pennsylvania election. So what changed? Well, what changed is sophisticated computers and mapping software that can split things up down to the finest level, down to that parking lot behind King of Prussia Mall. What changed is that in drawing these maps, the computer mapping software can look at things like how you voted the last time out. It can look at other things that are a proxy for your party affiliation. Things like your income, your education level, whether you subscribe to Architectural Digest. And all of that data, including data about your internet habits, can be fed into these programs and used to draw the maps. And they can draw the line right down the middle of your street, right down the line between you and your neighbor. They can draw the map to favor the incumbent if they have the power. Now, the two ways that are principal for this are the techniques called cracking and packing. Remember those terms? You'll hear them again. In cracking, the party in power attempts to take a stronghold of the opposing party and break it up into more districts, in effect making sure that the power center can't elect the representative that would actually represent the voters. In packing, the party in power knows that it's going to lose a certain district, and so what it does is reach to surrounding areas and pack more and more voters from that party that's going to win that district into the single district that it knows it will lose, causing the party that will win that district to waste an excess number of votes. Now, how are we going to remember all of these complex terms? Easy. Schoolhouse Rock.
Hacking and cracking, kidnapping, hijacking. We decide how we divide. Reach this district, we draw the lines. If you want your party to win it all, but a whole lot of voters say no. Just redraw those lines when it's election time. They're all cracked up, I'm cracking up. When the opposition is more widespread and you don't want to lose them all, just draw the nays all in one place. Yeah, pack them up, just pack them up. Packing and cracking, kidnapping, hijacking. We decide how we divide. Reach this district, we draw the lines. Got to draw the line somewhere, but you can't just draw it anywhere. One man, one vote, that's ridiculous. Your voice must be heard. If you really want an incumbency, but the people love her way too much, just draw her home in someone else's zone. Kidnap her house, hijack her out. And if you don't care about minorities and you don't want to work for their vote, keep them far away and they will have a say. Don't you reach out.
I hope you will remember packing and cracking now. And just so that you know that it's real, some of you may remember that the first time Barack Obama ran for an office, it was to the Illinois State House. And after serving in the State House for 2 years, he lost the next election and sat out for 2 years. Why? Because in that intervening period, the powers that be in Illinois literally kidnapped his house to another district. They redrew it and they went right around Barack Obama's house to take him out of the district that he had won the first time around. So this really does go on. So where do we stand? Do we as voters, do we the people have a chance? The answer is in many ways, thankfully, yes. The first is that we now have a chance to prove for the first time in the Supreme Court that a politically gerrymandered map is unconstitutional, is illegal. The last time this issue went to the Supreme Court, it was decided on a 5-4 basis that the Supreme Court would not intervene to rule a gerrymandered map unconstitutional. And Justice Kennedy, writing for the majority, said that what was missing was a workable standard that could be applied by the courts. Well, since that time, a political scientist and mathematician have gotten together and developed a political standard that can be applied even by courts that are not peopled by mathematicians. It's called the efficiency gap standard, and it is a mathematical formula for measuring how many votes are wasted based on how the map is drawn. It measures with a number packing and cracking. And these proponents of the efficiency gap have proposed to the federal courts and been successful in a case in Wisconsin, Whitford versus Gill, in saying that if a map results in a 7% waste of the vote, it should be presumed unconstitutional. That case is on its way to the United States Supreme Court, where we expect that Justice Kennedy will take one look at it and say, that's what I asked for. And when that happens, the maps in many, many states will be overturned and have to be redrawn. Why are we confident that Pennsylvania will be one of them? Well, if you look at all of the states that have an efficiency gap in their maps, our lovely Commonwealth is the worst. Our efficiency gap is more than 32%. What does that mean for us? Well, it means that in our elections, more politicians go unchallenged, both in the primary and in the general election. It means that we are given less choice. It means that incumbents are safe to an overwhelming degree. On a national basis, what this means is that our electorate over time has become more and more polarized. Because if you come from a safe district, you as a politician have no reason to listen to the opposition. You're more afraid of being primaried by somebody who is further to the extreme than in listening to a good idea that comes from across the aisle, and you're certainly not going to work across the aisle. What does this mean for our elected representatives in Harrisburg? Well, what it means is that they become the target of attack ads from extreme points of view. They really do fear being primaried out of their jobs, but they really have no reason to fear otherwise the general election. It means that they can't represent a variety of viewpoints. It means that with these huge districts that we create that sprawl all over the place, they have to have multiple offices, hire more staff, spend more money to administer their ability to talk with us voters. And what it really means is that the party leadership is the power they fear the most, not your vote at the ballot box. So why am I working on this? Doesn't this seem quixotic? The answer for me is that after the last election, I decided that I needed to get more involved, and that there were two problems that were going to require something that I had that I thought was really lacking in most people today, and that is a really long attention span. Why? Because in order to solve this problem in Pennsylvania, you have to know what the timeline looks like. The timeline for redistricting starts when we go into the next census. And over the course of the year 2020, there will be a national census. And after it's tabulated, the results of the census will be reported, and then redistricting and reapportionment will take place. And by sometime in 2021 or 2022, the maps will have to be redrawn. That requires a long attention span. What happens if we don't pay attention to that problem? Well, that's pretty easy. What happens is we get to witness a train wreck. Why? Because Pennsylvania, back at the beginning of the 20th century, had a lot of power in Washington, D.C. But we are slated to lose more population as people age and move to the sunny south and west. And so in the next census, it looks like we're going to lose 2 more representatives in Congress. And we are going to have to redraw maps and make some very uncomfortable choices. Add to that the fact that the 2 major parties have a strange, twisted kind of golden rule. And that is, do unto them before they can do unto you. because each of the parties has its own project, the Republican Red Map Project and the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, each of which is trying to outdo the other in redrawing maps that favor their own party. Well, no, there's nothing wrong inherently with that if you're a party. But if you're a voter, you should be very suspicious of their motives. What else can we look forward to? Well, expensive legal challenges. These are the states where the maps have been challenged and what the expenditures were through the end of 2016. And the lawyers love it, let me tell you. But the taxpayers really don't. And what we can expect is that we will see, unless we can fix this problem, lots more outside money in our races, lots more obnoxious attack advertisements. We can look forward to those 3 people on that commission in Harrisburg deciding who we vote for 10 years or more. Bipartisan solutions going out the window and disenfranchisement at the ballot box. Doom and gloom. But can we stop the problem? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Some states have nonpartisan commissions that are appointed solely to draw the maps in a fair basis. We can use the computer programs to draw efficient maps. All we have to do is pass rules that say that party affiliation and all of the data that proxies for it is not supposed to be considered. That the Constitution of Pennsylvania requires compact, contiguous, equal population districts that respect existing political boundaries. How hard is that? The answer is it's pretty hard if you're an established party politician, but for the rest of us, it's not all that hard. And the Supreme Court is likely to give us a decision recognizing the efficiency gap, and that's an additional piece of leverage that we, the people, have. Fair Districts PA stands for the proposition that we can do this here in Pennsylvania, that we can have an independent commission that we form, that we can apply sound methodologies for drawing the maps, that we can include meaningful opportunities for voter input, and that we can remove all of the political party stakeholders from the process. Can we do it? Absolutely. Both parties in our state, both major parties, have a reason to come to the table. Think about how I said the districts are drawn. Normal legislation for congressional districts, this 5-member commission for the PA House and PA Senate. And remember how that 5-member commission is drawn. The leaders and the majority and minority leaders from each house, and if they can't agree, the chairman appointed by a majority vote of the Supreme Court. And today, and through the end of this decade, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will be majority controlled by Democrats. People who tell you that they don't have a reason to be angry about this are asleep at the switch. Educate. The fairdistrictspa.com website contains a wealth of information about the problem. We will continue to update it. We will continue to make talks like this available throughout the period. Become an advocate. As you came in this evening, you might have gotten a postcard. Fill it out, send it to your state legislator. There are already bills in Harrisburg. Senate Bill 22 and House Bill 722 propose this nonpartisan commission solution. It would be a commission of 11 people. They are required not to be office holders, not to be party officers, not to be related to either of those two things, and to agree not to hold office or serve in a party for a period of time after they serve on the commission. It balances things. There is a requirement in the bill that minorities be represented, that minority parties be represented, and that they agree to the maps. This solves the problem, and it applies to both the congressional map and the state house maps equally. So it solves both problems. Now, people are already working on this problem and working on this problem in other states with success. How do I know? Arnold told me.
Gerrymandering has created an absurd reality where politicians now pick their voters instead of the voters picking their politicians.
The hell with you!
You thought that every 2 years in November, you're going to the polls to pick your representative, right? Wrong!
You cold-blooded bastard!
In California, the system was rigged so bad that between 2002 and 2010, we held 265 congressional elections. Guess how many districts changed party hands? Only one! Using gerrymandering, our politicians drew their district lines so safely that even while congressional approval ratings went sometimes down into the single digits, they couldn't lose. The former Soviet Politburo had more turnover than California politics.
You really believe that you're inside a movie?
But we fixed it. We took the power of drawing the district lines away from the politicians and gave it back to the people where it belongs.
Good idea.
And we have proven that gerrymandering can't be permanently terminated. Share this video if you think it's time to end gerrymandering in America and to make our politicians sane again.
Well, when Arnold tells you, you know it can be done. Over the course of the next several months, Fair Districts PA will be out working at rooms like this all over the Commonwealth. You will also start to see us pop up in other unexpected places. And this is a preview of something that you are likely to see quite soon.
And now, from the state capitol in Harrisburg, a message from your representative, gerrymandering.
Drink, 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 get big and strong for daddy. There you go. Oh, hello. Didn't see you there. I'm gerrymandering, and I'm representing you in Pennsylvania's General Assembly. I was just here tending to my succulent in my office. He's my best friend and my #1 priority. I wanted to take a moment and address you, my most dedicated supporters. During my campaign, I pledged to eliminate competition in elections and take away voter rights by redrawing district maps to make it easy for me to win every time I run. I also asked for your support in my re-election campaign. In the end, I'm happy to report that I was sent back to Harrisburg along with most of my buddies. It's true, nothing changed. But I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the hard-fought race that I pretended to run. Sure, I ran completely unopposed, but I know that if I actually ran against anyone, they would have been worthy adversaries. You see, as a long-time elected official, I can draw the lines to my own district however I want. I can look at things like voting patterns, demographics, average neighborhood income. Heck, I can even see what magazines you subscribe to. And I can get a pretty good sense of whether or not you'll be voting for me. Which is why when we redraw the lines in 2021, I'll be armed with as many facts and figures as I can get my hands on to make sure I can just draw anyone out of my district who might not be on board with little old me. The best part of it all? Doing this is completely legal in Pennsylvania. That's right, using political data to choose the voters I want in my district, totes okay. Now, there are some nonpartisan groups like Fair Districts PA who want to make political redistricting illegal. They like to ask my colleagues and me questions, and to be honest, it's super annoying and kinda rude. Sometimes they'll ask, is drawing district lines like this fair? Or does it undermine the foundation of our democracy? Or even, does it eliminate competition in elections? But to those who have questions about the fairness of this process, I have a question for you. Who is going to water my plant if I'm not here anymore? Why do you hate my plant so much? Why do you hate Gary? He's done nothing. He's my soulmate. And so, my fellow Pennsylvanians, thank you for your ongoing support. I'd say I couldn't have done it without you, but you know.
If you want fair, competitive elections, contact your legislator today.
No, that's literally the opposite of what I want.
Fair Districts PA has made it easier than ever to make your voice heard. Visit our website today to support our efforts.
Who's saying that? How did you get in here?
It's a public building, and you leave your key under the mat.
Oh, right. That's on me. That's fair.
Approved and paid for by Fair Districts PA.
In sum, I hope that you will join me in being outraged. I hope that you will join me in contacting our state legislators and letting them know that this is a problem that needs to be fixed. And I hope that you'll join me in having a long attention span as we work through this in the next 6 years. We've got some things to do, but we've got some good ideas and some good people who are willing to work on it. And I look forward to your questions. So the question is, if you just go by this efficiency standard, doesn't that in some cases lead to excessive polarization? In part because there are places where the people who live there are overwhelmingly of one party or another, and they've chosen to live near people of like party. The answer is that the efficiency standard is a metric for measuring the map after it's drawn, not for being used to drive how you draw the map. And so you draw the map based upon the other kinds of criteria, based upon the idea that you want to have diverse communities, that you want to maintain communities of interest together. And so it allows you to use the traditional tools of drawing a map, but it provides a check and a balance on how that map functions, much the same way that the Voting Rights Act does for exceptionally racially biased maps. The efficiency gap standard then is used after the map is created to check that you don't have the party bias as a driving factor in how the districts were drawn. And it just limits how much of that bias you can build in. And that's why this is a complex problem. There isn't just one good thing where you can put the state into the grinder and turn the crank and come out with a perfect map. There are an infinite number of maps, and you are always balancing the constitutional mandates against each other. So for instance, the last time the maps were drawn in 2012, they were challenged on the basis that they unnecessarily split up a lot of political subdivisions. And the people challenging the map literally went to court and showed how in some places in a county, 14 townships had been split once or more than once, but that it was equally possible to draw that map and only split up 4. And the court took a look at that and said, yes, that's an excessive amount, it's unnecessary, go back and redraw the map, and sent it back to the legislature. So those are the ways that it works. You draw the map and then you apply the checks to the back end of it. Since the last census, how many states have been successful in going to commissions? The answer is, in addition to California, there have, I believe, been 4 other states that have either switched over to commission or modified their existing commission to make it a nonpartisan or less partisan commission. The most recent one of those being Arizona, which went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Republican Party in Arizona challenged a statewide referendum to create such a commission, and the Supreme Court approved that statewide referendum as an exercise of the state's legislative power. So that was a win for the commission there. The bills in Harrisburg, as they have been introduced in the last month, have bipartisan sponsorship and bipartisan support. You can look up on the website in Harrisburg, you will see that both the House and Senate version have extensive bipartisan sponsorship. And at last count, I think almost all of the members of the committee in the Senate to which it's been referred have expressed their support. So this is a true bipartisan effort. Is there going to be squabbling on this commission? The answer is, it's political, it's made up of people. What do you think? I would rather that they squabble out in the open, in a clear, open, public process that is required to take input from voters, and do it all there rather than in the classic smoke-filled back room, which is what we've got right now. So yes, I expect squabbling. I think it'll be a great spectator sport. So the question is, as far as the Supreme Court challenge, Whitford versus Gill, that's coming, is it likely to be influenced by the new Supreme Court justice? It's safe to say that everything will be influenced by the new Supreme Court justice. However, the last time this case came up, Justice Scalia was part of the 5-4 majority. It would therefore be likely with the split that you would find that Justice Gorsuch, should he be confirmed, would end up essentially taking Scalia's place. Justice Kennedy is the swing justice. He would swing it 5-4 the other way, having asked for a workable metric to use. So it would affect it, but it would not affect the outcome, is what I'm saying. So when the Whitford versus Gill decision comes down from the Supreme Court, the efficiency standard is what we expect to be used to judge maps. At that point, it will be incumbent upon someone in Pennsylvania to file a lawsuit in federal court challenging the state maps here in Pennsylvania as violating that efficiency standard. And we know from the math that we've already done that it violates it massively, that we have a 32% efficiency gap. A federal court would then be required to follow the Supreme Court decision and to order the state of Pennsylvania to redraw its maps. And in all likelihood, depending on the timing, that would have to be done before the 2018 election. So we're on a fast track with this one. The federal court in Wisconsin has already ordered the Wisconsin legislature to redraw all of their maps. That has been appealed to the Supreme Court. So they're not redrawing the maps until that appeal is over. But that's where it stands at the moment. So the answer to that is that in the upcoming cycle that occurs after the 2020 census, the way in which it would spin out is that it's highly likely that the Republicans would retain their majorities in both the House and the Senate in Harrisburg, and therefore be able to draw the congressional map for the period of 2021 through 2030. However, because the state house map would be drawn by a commission that would have its chair appointed by the Supreme Court, which is majority Democratic and will likely stay that way, the Democrats would control how the lines are drawn for Harrisburg. And that means that in the long run, the Republican control of Harrisburg goes away because of that. And if they lose that, then in the cycle 10 years beyond that, they lose the ability to control who draws the congressional lines as well. And so if you can see the handwriting on the wall 10 and 20 years out, you have a reason to come to the table even though you enjoy the benefit of the gerrymander today. And that's what puts us in this unique situation today in Harrisburg. Well, in the most recent election, I believe that for all of the congressional seats, Republicans polled just slightly more than 50% of the popular vote. Now, they still ended up with a 13-5 advantage in the Congress, but they had right around half of the vote. And one would expect that if you eliminated the gerrymander, if you went back to compact, contiguous, neutral districts, that you would get closer to a 50-50 split, closer to the natural vote, although you might not be able to get all the way there because the population in Pennsylvania for Democrats is very highly concentrated in Philadelphia, in Allegheny County, in Scranton, and a couple of other places. So that concentration tends to result in a wasted vote count, in an overvote. But there are even ways to resolve that because, as I showed you, if you draw the lines one direction, you get one result. If you draw them the other direction, you get another result, which means that if you had as your objective starting with a more neutral palette, you could actually start in this corner of the state near Philadelphia and begin to draw districts that draw suburban Republicans into some of the districts in Philadelphia to mix them up a little bit more. And you could start, you literally just have to draw the lines east-west rather than north-south, and you get that result. Political subdivision is a town, township, county, borough, city, and so forth. One of the things that Fair Districts PA is doing is assembling citizens who will take on a responsibility of helping us to build this popular support wave for this effort. And part of that is going to our local governing bodies, our township commissions, our borough commissions, and so forth, and asking that each one pass a resolution in support of ending gerrymandering in Pennsylvania. We've been successful in a great number of counties and townships around the Commonwealth so far. We are always looking for more volunteers who will help us with this, and it's a process by which we go out in our neighborhoods and we gather petition signatures. We go and sit down and talk with our township commissioners and make sure that they're on board. We talk with party leaders and make sure that they'll be on board. And the objective is to have all of these expressions of support so that it counters the natural tendency of the party leaders in Harrisburg, who after all are the only ones with something to lose in this process. What we want to do is make sure that the voters are heard and that the party leaders know that their time is up on this one. The question is, does Fair Districts PA have a sample resolution that people can use in your own townships? What kind of a group would we be if I had to say no? Of course we do, and we'll be glad to share it with you, as well as a standard form of petition that you can use, a standard cover letter. You name it, we are here to support that grassroots effort. Thank you for asking. I want to thank all of you for taking the time on this dreary evening to come out to get educated about this critical topic in our democracy. And I look forward to seeing all of you as I travel through the Commonwealth working on this issue for the next 6 years. Long attention span. Have a great night.